The Boys Season 5 Episode 6 is officially here, so let's just get right into it. Because today we're talking The Boys Season 5 Episode 6 breakdown and review. But before we get into anything, guys, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. Alright, getting right into the episode. I know a lot of people are going to say this episode was pretty much a setup for the finale of The Boys, and while I will agree with that to a degree, I do also think some really interesting things happened in this particular episode, and there were still some really enjoyable moments. First and foremost, that entire interaction between Sister Sage and Ashley was great. Sage just trying to prompt Ashley to turn against Homelander and to work with her to try to manipulate Soulja Boy to pit these two against each other. And then speaking of Soulja Boy, I also really like the moment where he comes in and talks to Sister Sage, and he just absolutely refuses to do essentially anything she says. He even says to her that he's going to do what he wants, and he interjects some very iconic Soulja Boy isms. And then after he leaves, we do see that the other Ashley was able to read his mind, and after she reads his mind, she is absolutely horrified, and she quite literally tells Sage that Soulja Boy doesn't necessarily hate Homelander anymore. In fact, he's actually trying to get him the V1. He wants him to become immortal. And even beyond that, he's actually proud of him. He just can't admit it. And in this moment, we see the horror in Sage's eyes. However, she is still the world's smartest person. So it's at this point she says she has to switch to a different plan. She then just leaves Ashley hanging. So considering that, it does make sense why Ashley had reservations of helping Sage to begin with. That being said, then we do see what part of Sage's new plan is, and part of that plan is to try to pit Soulja Boy and Homelander against each other, and how better to do that than with a common love interest. So when they arrive after tracking down Bombsight, instead of finding Bombsight, they actually see a laptop, and on there it is a lot of stuff about Homelander and Stormfront, and in this moment we do get a little confrontation between Soulja Boy and Homelander. However, we also get a really vulnerable moment, not only from Soulja Boy, but also from Homelander. We see what Stormfront meant to him. We see how much it hurt him to lose her, and he thought he would be with her forever. And in this moment, I feel like they were trying to convey to us, the audience, that these two characters are going to be against each other. However, in my opinion, I have been of the firm belief since they went to that V1 facility that Soulja Boy is 100% going to remain on Homelander's side. They have a certain bond now, and considering what happens at the end of the episode, which I will get into in a little bit, I think I was pretty right in making that assumption. Soulja Boy has a tremendous amount of care for Homelander. However, there were also some other details we'll talk about in a little bit. And while yes, I do think some other things contributed to Soulja Boy's decision a little bit later in the episode, I do also believe that his genuine pride and love for his son that he realized he had played a huge factor in his ultimate decision. Now, another moment that I really liked has to do with Chet, the producer that used to work with Soulja Boy and has worked with multiple soups. His whole interaction with Homelander was absolutely perfect. He, in that moment, after hearing Homelander talking to an angel and talking about why he deserves V1 and why this isn't working for him, Chet then comes to the conclusion that he is going to be killed. So in this moment, he speaks freely. He says everything that's on his mind to Homelander. And in this moment, Homelander quite literally says to him, "You're not afraid of me?" And I love Chet's response because it somewhat reminds me of how Stan Edgar treats Homelander. However, the distinct difference here is that this isn't Chet talking down to Homelander, giving some type of superiority over Homelander. Instead, he's making it clear that it's coming from a genuine place of care, and he even says that he feels bad for him, and he keeps referring to him as kid. He goes so far as to actually put his hand on Homelander's shoulder, and Homelander literally tells him that he can just leave. Don't say anything and leave. Now, is this supposed to be a parallel to what happened last episode with how he told Firecracker to just leave, and then he only ended up killing her after she further proclaimed that she's his one true follower? I think that could be the case. However, I also just think Homelander genuinely appreciated the honesty, and he appreciated the fact that someone was actually having genuine care for him that wasn't out of fear. Because although Firecracker definitely professed how much she cared for Homelander and how much she loved him, he could also tell that she was extremely afraid of him. Whereas in this moment, this person wasn't. And not only was he not showing fear, he also was showing Homelander respect, and he was also showing Homelander compassion. So that's why I actually really like this scene, because it does show that although Homelander is an absolute monster, he does still have a small amount of morality inside of him. And yes, it is normally reserved for people like Soulja Boy and Ryan, because those are the only two people that he has not killed after they quite literally betrayed him. However, in this moment, I think he's also showing us that what he is truly after is compassion, not something that's based out of fear. Remember what he used to tell Maeve and Starlight. He would prefer to be loved by others. However, he would also take being feared. But in my opinion, his actions have showed that he actually really doesn't like only being feared. What he truly wants is compassion and love from everyone, not just something that's based in fear. And that's also why the interaction between him and Huey at the beginning of this season is so interesting. He is incredibly envious of Huey. Someone with no powers has so many people willing to risk their lives for him, yet Homelander feels like absolutely no one would do the same for him. So I just feel like this particular moment adds so many layers to the character that is Homelander. And again, I'm not saying Homelander is a good person at all. He is an absolute monster. We have 5 seasons that prove that. However, he does still seek compassion. So if you show him some level of compassion that isn't based out of fear, I think you do have a pretty good shot of surviving whatever situation you're in. Now, going on to a little bit later in the episode, I did mention the fact that Sister Sage is officially going against Homelander, and part of her plan was to pit Soldier Boy and Homelander against each other. However, another part of her plan was to actually join the boys, and she reveals that she does have a method to find Bombsight, and it's in this moment they are able to locate Bombsight, and Bombsight seems to be one of the most rational soups we have ever encountered, because yes, he starts to fight the boys. However, it's understandable considering they quite literally kidnap the person that he's in love with. However, before there's a conclusion to this battle, Soldier Boy does arrive, and then we do start to see a fight between Bombsight and Soldier Boy. This fight was really interesting. However, to me, one of the most interesting things was that Sister Sage actually texted Soldier Boy, and it was her idea to bring him there, and she truly believes that because of the rift that she had placed between Soldier Boy and Homelander, that there is no way that Soldier Boy would not fully turn against Homelander in this moment. So she's relying on Soldier Boy to take out Bombsight and to get the V1 to destroy it. And while Sage is right about part of this, Soldier Boy is able to defeat Bombsight, and they have a little heart-to-heart that results in Bombsight losing his powers so he can grow old with the person he loves. Homelander does arrive at that point, and he and Soldier Boy have a conversation. They do talk about Stormfront, and as all this is happening, all of the boys and Sister Sage are all watching from afar, but in this moment, Soldier Boy decides to talk about what Stormfront used to say to him, what she used to call him, but then Soldier Boy says that she was wrong, and she only said those things because she hadn't met Homelander yet. And it's in this moment that Soldier Boy decides to give Homelander the V1. And while this is going on, it flashes to Sister Sage, and she says she didn't see this coming. She says this wasn't supposed to happen. She's the world's smartest person after all. How could this happen? And as she is trying to reflect on this and reflect on how her plans went so wrong, Homelander is able to laser through his arm, eject the V1, and then we do see that giant blast that we saw in the trailer, and Homelander is officially fully powered up, and the episode ends with the boys all having to flee with an all-powerful Homelander, not to mention Soldier Boy on his side. So they are definitely up against it in these last 2 episodes. And in my opinion, the entire reason that Sister Sage's plan failed, the one variable she did not account for, was everything that happened between Soldier Boy and Homelander, but more importantly, what happened to Soldier Boy when they went to that V1 facility, when Soldier Boy was forced to kill someone he used to know, when Soldier Boy was faced with all of his past, with all of his failures, and how everyone treated him back then. And it was from that point on, plus the fact that Homelander decided to spare Soldier Boy, that Soldier Boy became so dedicated to Homelander that last episode pretty much revolved around Soldier Boy protecting Homelander when Homelander was in one of his weakest states. And these were all things that Sage couldn't have known. She didn't know exactly what happened in that facility. If she had, I don't believe she would have texted Soldier Boy. I don't think she would have believed that he would have turned on Homelander in that moment. But because she didn't understand the inner workings of their relationship, because she didn't understand what exactly they had gone through to create and solidify this bond, she had miscalculated. And as we've seen multiple times through media, the world's smartest person, if they make one slight calculation error, it often results in everything blowing up in their face. And that's exactly what happens in this moment. If Sage didn't text Soldier Boy in that moment, Bombsight might have gotten away with the V1. However, she was overconfident in herself, got Soldier Boy there, and Soldier Boy handed over the V1 to Homelander. And now the world is absolutely screwed. All in all, I absolutely enjoyed all of these moments in this episode. That being said, there are still a couple things that I wasn't a huge fan of. Like I mentioned, this was mainly a setup episode, and while there was still some really interesting things, I just feel like considering we only have 2 episodes left, I'm just really hoping that it doesn't feel like a really rushed ending. And speaking of rushed, I feel like the Deep killing Noir in the way he did just felt extremely rushed. It felt like their rivalry hadn't been forming for very long. It feels like they went from best friends to rivals to people who hated each other to people who were trying to one-up each other to then straight up killing each other. It makes Noir's character feel pretty lackluster. I don't really understand why he was brought back if he was just going to be offed by the Deep in this way. They didn't even really have a fight, the Deep quite literally snuck up behind him, started choking him out, and then took one of his daggers and just stabbed him right through the face. I think the only part of this that I actually liked was how afraid the Deep was, because he realizes that he could be in some pretty deep shit when Homelander finds this out. However, considering what Homelander gets in the end of this episode, I don't think he'll really care about the loss of Noir. But since we're speaking of pointless fights, I feel like the whole O-Father versus Starlight fight was pretty anticlimactic. Starlight just powered up multiple times and then kept getting blasted away, only for Huey to swoop in and threaten to use the virus, even though O-Father probably knows he's not going to do it because it would infect Starlight. And all Huey had to say was, "Oh no, she's been injected with the cure, she'll be fine." And then that just resulted in O-Father leaving. It just felt like a really pointless scene and a really anticlimactic battle. I would have liked to see them actually fight a little bit more, or just not have this moment in the episode at all. Now, as far as how the boys are going to triumph over Homelander in the end, I think they are going to suffer a ton of casualties, especially because Homelander is so powerful at this moment, and because he has the help of Soldier Boy, who is literally devoted to him. I don't see a reality in which the boys come out of this unscathed at all. I think a vast majority of the boys will end up getting killed in these final 2 episodes. And in my opinion, the only real way that I could see Soldier Boy and Homelander being defeated is if Ryan is re-injected into the story. In my opinion, he was left alive for a reason. They didn't decide to leave him alive to not bring him back in some way. They have teased him as the chosen one. Now, does that mean he's going to single-handedly defeat Soldier Boy and Homelander? No, probably not. However, I feel like he is going to be instrumental in that plan, and I could see a scenario in which he has to go up against Soldier Boy. And if the result of that battle is the death of Soldier Boy, it will leave Homelander in a pretty vulnerable state, because yes, he'll be incredibly angry. However, he'll be incredibly distraught. So in that moment, they could try to do something against Homelander. But it is seeming more and more likely that they will end up just using the virus, and pretty much every soup on Earth is going to end up dying. And I feel like the only way that Annie and Kimiko survive is if they do go to Sage's bunker that she did mention to the boys in this episode, and they just end up either living there for multiple years, or maybe that becomes their new life, because a life with the people you love is better than a life in the outside world without those people. However, I'm interested to hear from all of you. What did you think of this episode? What did you think of Noir versus the Deep? And how do you think these final 2 episodes will play out? How do you think Homelander will be defeated? Let me know in the comments below. And while you guys are down there, please, for me, like this video, subscribe to the page, and hit that noti bell. And I'll see all of you in the next video. Goodbye.